Hey guys, tonight we begin with the surprisingly complex and wildly misunderstood world of goats. Those bleating creatures we've dismissed as simple farm animals, when the truth is their daily existence is filled with intricate social hierarchies, cunning survival tactics, and intelligence that would shock most people. While we think of them as boring lawnmowers, the reality is goat life is anything but dull. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's all fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. By day 3 of existence, you've made a startling discovery. The world is significantly larger than the corner of the barn where you were born. This revelation comes to you while staring at what appears to be the edge of everything. A wooden fence that stands roughly knee-high to the humans but towers over you like the Great Wall of Maybe Not. Your first escape attempt happens entirely by accident. You're following a particularly interesting butterfly, orange and black, fluttering with the confidence of something that has never worried about predators, when you suddenly realize you're on the wrong side of that wooden suggestion. The fence, it turns out, was more of a polite recommendation than an actual barrier. Who knew? For exactly 37 seconds, you experience the intoxicating rush of freedom. The grass here tastes exactly the same as the grass back there, but somehow carries the faint flavor of rebellion. You're a renegade now, a goat without borders. Get back here. The farmer's voice cuts through your philosophical moment like a chainsaw through meditation. You discover that your legs, which have been unreliable at best, suddenly develop the coordination of a seasoned ballet dancer when motivated by a human moving toward you with purpose. You scramble back through the fence opening, trip over your own hooves, and land in what you hope is mud but suspect might be something less pleasant. Your mother gives you a look that somehow manages to convey disappointment, relief, and "I told you so," all in a single glance. It's your first lesson in the complex emotional vocabulary of goat expressions. The next day, the farmer introduces you to a concept that will fundamentally reshape your understanding of boundaries. The electric fence. It looks innocent enough, just a thin wire running parallel to the wooden fence, humming quietly to itself like someone remembering a song. You approach it with the fearless curiosity of youth, which is really just ignorance wearing a confident hat. The wire doesn't look dangerous. It's skinnier than the shoelaces on the farmer's boots. How much trouble could something so delicate possibly cause? Your nose touches the wire. The universe explodes. Not literally, of course, but for a moment that lasts roughly the length of a sneeze. Every nerve in your body receives a telegram informing them that they've made a terrible mistake. The shock travels from your nose to your tail with the efficiency of bad news, leaving you with the distinct impression that you've been personally criticized by lightning. You leap backward with a grace you didn't know you possessed, landing in a pile of hay that cushions your dignity more than your body. Your mother watches this performance with what might be amusement if goats were capable of such complex emotions. Several of the older goats nod approvingly, as if you've just passed some sort of initiation ritual. This is your introduction to the concept that not all boundaries are negotiable. Some suggestions, it turns out, come with consequences that make themselves immediately and memorably clear. You file this information under things to remember when considering life choices. The rest of the week is devoted to mastering the fundamental skill of eating grass, which proves to be harder than it looks and less satisfying than advertised. The grass closest to the ground requires you to fold your legs in ways that seem anatomically questionable. The grass higher up requires stretching your neck until you feel like a furry giraffe having an identity crisis. You watch the older goats make it look effortless, their jaws moving in a rhythmic meditation of chewing that suggests they've found some deep meaning in the process. When you try to copy their technique, you mostly succeed in getting dirt in your mouth and developing a crick in your neck. Your mother demonstrates the proper grass-eating posture with the patience of someone who has explained this many times before. Front legs slightly bent, neck extended but not strained, jaw working in steady circles. She makes it look like a peaceful dance between goat and earth. You attempt to replicate her movements and immediately step on your own front hoof. The art of following proves equally challenging. Walking behind your mother should be simple, one foot in front of the other. Maintain distance, try not to trip over anything. But your mother's hooves seem to have a magnetic attraction to your feet. Every time she steps left, you step left directly into her previous footprint. When she stops to examine something interesting, you walk directly into her hindquarters like a furry bumper car. She tolerates this with the resignation of someone who has raised many clumsy children. Occasionally, she pauses to look back at you with an expression that seems to ask, "Are you doing this on purpose? Or are you really this uncoordinated?" The honest answer, which you lack the vocabulary to express, is that you're really this uncoordinated. But you're learning. Each stumble teaches you something about balance. Each misstep shows you where your feet actually are in relation to where you think they are. Each embarrassing moment adds another small lesson to your growing collection of how to be a goat without constantly embarrassing yourself. By the end of the week, you can follow your mother for almost 10 consecutive steps without stepping on her, yourself, or anything else. This feels like a monumental achievement worthy of celebration. The celebration consists of a particularly satisfying patch of clover and a nap in the afternoon sun. Sometimes, you're learning, the best rewards are the simplest ones. 3 weeks into your existence, you wake up one morning with the distinct sensation that your head weighs more than it did yesterday. This is not the philosophical weight of newfound wisdom, but the very literal weight of 2 small, hard bumps that have appeared overnight on your forehead, like surprise houseguests who forgot to knock. Your horns are coming in. The process feels like having very slow lightning bolts sprouting from your forehead, if lightning bolts were made of bone and took weeks to reach full size. The sensation is somewhere between an itch you can't scratch and the feeling of your teeth growing, except it's happening in the wrong place, and there's nothing you can do about it. You try rubbing your head against fence posts, rocks, and the patient sides of larger goats. This provides temporary relief and permanent entertainment for the older members of the herd, who remember their own horn-growing days with the fondness of survivors looking back on a natural disaster. The bumps grow slowly but persistently, like tiny mountains rising from the landscape of your skull. Within a week, they're visible to everyone. Within 2 weeks, they're unmistakably horns, even if they're still small enough to be mistaken for unusual cowlicks by someone not paying attention. You spend considerable time examining your reflection in the water trough, turning your head left and right to admire your new additions from different angles. They make you look older, more serious, like a goat with opinions about things. You practice lowering your head in what you imagine is a threatening gesture, but mostly succeed in looking like you're trying to find a contact lens in the grass. Your first climbing lesson happens by accident when you follow an interesting smell up a fallen log and suddenly find yourself 3 feet off the ground with no clear understanding of how you got there. The log seemed flat from below, but from up here, you can see it's actually quite narrow, and the ground looks significantly farther away than physics suggests it should be. This is your introduction to the philosophical question of why goats climb. The answer, you're beginning to suspect, is not because it's particularly useful or safe, but because the alternative, staying on the flat, boring ground, lacks the creative challenge of figuring out how to get down from places you probably shouldn't have gone up in the first place. You stand on the log for what feels like several minutes, but is probably closer to 30 seconds, swaying slightly in the breeze and reconsidering your life choices. Eventually, you work up the courage to jump down, which you accomplish with all the grace of a dropped piano. You land safely but loudly, startling a nearby chicken who gives you a look of profound disapproval. This experience teaches you that climbing is less about getting somewhere specific and more about proving to yourself that you can. It's a skill that will serve you well in the months to come, assuming you can improve your dismounting technique. The hierarchy wars begin in earnest during your 4th week, as you and your fellow kids navigate the complex social mathematics of determining who stands where in the grand order of goat society. This process involves a lot of posturing, some experimental headbutting, and the gradual realization that you're Switzerland neutral, generally inoffensive, and unlikely to invade anyone unless they're holding something really interesting. The popular kids, you notice, seem to have figured out life before lunch. They move with confidence, eat the best grass without being challenged, and somehow always know which direction the herd is planning to move before anyone officially decides. You study them the way a student studies for a test they don't understand, trying to decode the secret of their effortless competence. Your own approach to hierarchy is more diplomatic. You're not interested in being the leader that looks like too much work and responsibility. You're also not content being at the very bottom, where you'd spend all your time being pushed around by goats with more ambition than sense. Your natural position seems to be somewhere in the comfortable middle, where you can observe the drama without being directly involved in it. This strategy serves you well when conflicts arise over who gets the first access to fresh hay or the best sunny spots. While the more ambitious kids lock horns in elaborate dominance displays, you simply wait for them to tire themselves out, then casually move in to claim whatever territory they've forgotten to defend. Your voice, meanwhile, is going through changes that embarrass everyone within earshot. What started as cute baby bleats has evolved into an unpredictable collection of squeaks, honks, and sounds that seem to surprise even you when they emerge from your throat. You attempt a confident bleat and produce something that sounds like a rusty gate having an argument with a deflating balloon. The older goats tolerate these vocal experiments with the patience of family members listening to a teenager learn the trumpet. Your mother occasionally tilts her head when you make a particularly unusual sound, as if trying to determine whether you're attempting communication or just having some sort of mechanical malfunction. You practice your bleating in private, behind the barn where no one can witness your efforts to produce sounds that convey meaning rather than confusion. Slowly, gradually, your voice begins to settle into something recognizably goat-like. Not sophisticated, perhaps, but at least clearly intentional. By the end of your first month, you can produce 3 distinct types of bleats. The general purpose, "Hey, I'm here," bleat. The more urgent, "I want something," bleat. And the experimental, "I'm trying to sound important," bleat that you're still working on. It's a limited vocabulary, but it covers most of your conversational needs. The month ends with the satisfying realization that you're no longer the newest, most confused member of the herd. Your horns are visible, your voice is recognizable, and you can climb things without immediately falling off them. You're becoming, slowly but surely, an actual goat, rather than just something that looks like one. The goat social scene, you discover, is more complex than the average university faculty meeting and twice as petty. There are popular kids, outcasts, middle-tier social climbers, and you, the anthropology student, taking notes from the sidelines while trying not to get trampled by the politics. The popular kids are immediately recognizable by their effortless confidence and their ability to eat the best grass without anyone challenging their right to be there. They move through the herd like celebrities through a crowded restaurant, assuming that space will open up for them because it always has. Their horns are straight and impressive, their coats gleam with health, and they never seem to have hay stuck in embarrassing places. Chief among them is a goat you privately call Duchess, not because she has any official title, but because she carries herself with the bearing of someone who expects other people to carry her things. Duchess has mastered the art of looking bored while simultaneously monitoring everything that happens within a 30-foot radius. When she wants something, she doesn't ask for it. She simply positions herself where it is and waits for the universe to rearrange itself around her preferences. Then there's Captain, whose name suits his tendency to charge headfirst into any situation that might require leadership, decision-making, or just someone willing to go first through a potentially dangerous doorway. Captain has opinions about everything, and the confidence to share them loudly. His horns curve dramatically, like punctuation marks emphasizing his personality. You watch these social titans with the fascination of a nature documentarian studying a species you don't quite understand. They make it look so easy, this business of being important and having other goats care about your opinions. When Duchess decides she wants to lie in a particular sunny spot, the current occupant simply moves. When Captain determines that it's time to investigate something interesting, half the herd follows him without question. Your own social strategy is more cautious. You've learned that direct challenges to the established order tend to result in humiliation, usually public, often involving your dignity and frequently your footing. Instead, you've developed a policy of strategic alliance building with goats who seem equally confused by the whole system. Your first real friendship develops with a kid you mentally nickname Scholar, partly because of his thoughtful approach to grass selection, and partly because he seems as perplexed by human behavior as you are. Scholar has the useful quality of being interested in things without needing to own them, which makes him an ideal companion for joint investigations into questions like, what happens if we both push on this gate at the same time? And why do humans make those noises when they see us standing on their cars? Together, you and Scholar form a 2-goat think tank dedicated to figuring out the mysterious rules that govern your world. Why do humans sometimes laugh when you climb on things and sometimes shout? Why does the farmer fill the water trough every morning when it's never completely empty? Why do the chickens act like they own the place when everyone knows goats are obviously more important? These philosophical discussions, conducted entirely through meaningful looks and synchronized head tilts, bond you in the way that shared confusion often bonds creatures who are trying to navigate a world that doesn't come with an instruction manual. Learning to headbutt proves to be like learning to high-five with your skull, theoretically straightforward, practically complicated, and socially essential despite being mildly ridiculous. The technique involves lowering your head, aiming for your target, and launching yourself forward with enough force to make contact without enough force to cause actual damage. It's a delicate balance between assertion and restraint, like diplomatic negotiations conducted through controlled collision. Your early attempts at headbutting are about as successful as your early attempts at walking, which is to say, they accomplish their goal while raising serious questions about your coordination and judgment. You aim for another goat's head and hit their shoulder. You calculate the perfect amount of force and either barely make contact or send your practice partner stumbling backward with a look of surprise. Scholar proves to be an excellent headbutting partner because he's making the same mistakes you are, just in slightly different directions. Together, you practice the art of controlled aggression, learning to telegraph your intentions clearly enough that your opponent can prepare appropriately, but not so obviously that you lose the element of surprise in real situations. The art of looking busy when the farmer approaches becomes crucial to your survival and comfort. Farmers, you learn, have strong opinions about what goats should and shouldn't be doing, and these opinions don't always align with your personal interests. When you see the farmer heading your way with that purposeful stride that suggests he has plans for your immediate future, the key is to appear fully engaged in some goat-appropriate activity. Eating grass works well, as does the appearance of deep contemplation while staring at something in the distance. Grooming yourself or a friend suggests responsibility and social awareness. The key is to avoid looking like you're plotting anything, bored enough to cause trouble, or involved in any activity that might require human intervention to resolve. You and Scholar perfect a system of casual alerts, subtle head movements that mean human approaching. Assume innocent positions immediately. This system proves invaluable for maintaining your reputation as goats, who are probably up to something but never anything specific enough to warrant direct action. Summer arrives like a lazy cat stretching in the sun gradually, then all at once, bringing with it the kind of heat that makes the grass crispy and transforms shade from a pleasant luxury into premium real estate worth fighting for. You learn that weather isn't just something that happens around you, it's something that shapes every decision you make, from where you stand to when you eat, to how much energy you're willing to spend on activities that seemed important last week. The grass changes personality with the temperature. Spring grass was tender and optimistic, full of moisture and promise. Summer grass develops character, which is to say it becomes tough, chewy, and requires significantly more effort to process into something resembling nutrition. You find yourself spending more time chewing and less time exploring, like a food critic who's been assigned to review the same restaurant every day for 3 months. The great water trough debates begin in earnest when the temperature rises above comfortable and stays there. What was once a communal resource becomes the center of complex negotiations, involving timing, etiquette, and the fine art of drinking efficiently while maintaining social awareness. The politics are more complex than international diplomacy. Duchess, naturally, believes she should have first access whenever she desires it, regardless of who might already be drinking or how long they've been waiting. Captain takes the approach that water access should be determined by who's willing to push hardest for position. The smaller goats develop elaborate strategies involving patience, distraction, and the ability to slip in and out quickly when the big personalities are busy posturing at each other. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when the trough is about to become contested territory. Duchess's approach is preceded by a particular way of carrying her head that suggests she's made a decision about something. Captain's arrival is announced by the slight acceleration of his normal walking pace and a tendency to look directly at whoever is currently drinking. Your strategy involves timing and diplomacy. You learn to drink quickly but not obviously hurriedly, to position yourself where you can finish and move away before conflict develops, and to never, ever attempt to defend your position against someone who outweighs you by more than 20 pounds and has bigger horns. Scholar and you develop a mutual early warning system, subtle signals that allow you to coordinate your water access for maximum efficiency and minimum drama. When one of you spots trouble approaching, a slight head movement alerts the other to either finish quickly or postpone their drink until the political situation stabilizes. Your first thunderstorm arrives on a Tuesday afternoon when the air has been thick and still all day, like the world holding its breath before sneezing. The older goats seem to sense it coming hours before the first clouds appear, moving with the restless energy of creatures who know something is about to happen but can't explain how they know. The storm announces itself with a rumble that starts somewhere beyond the horizon and rolls toward you like a slow avalanche made of sound. You've never heard anything like it too low for music, too sustained for machinery, too ominous for anything good. The hair on your back rises without your permission, as if your body knows something your brain hasn't figured out yet. When the first lightning flash illuminates the sky, You discover that nature has a sense of drama that makes human theatre look subtle. The world transforms from day to night and back again in the space of a heartbeat, shadows jumping and disappearing like nervous thoughts. Thunder follows with the authority of something that doesn't need to explain itself, rattling your bones and making your ears ring. This, you realize, is nature's way of testing your bravery. The test results are immediate and definitive. You fail spectacularly. Your courage, which felt reasonably solid when facing challenges like electric fences and social hierarchies, dissolves like sugar in rain. You find yourself pressed against the barn wall next to Scholar and several other goats who are also discovering that they're not as brave as they thought they were. The rain, when it finally arrives, falls with the enthusiasm of water that has been waiting all day for permission to drop. It's not the gentle rain of spring that makes everything smell fresh and green. This is rain with an agenda. Rain that has places to be and things to accomplish. Rain that doesn't care if you were planning to spend the afternoon doing anything other than being wet. You huddle under the barn overhang with the rest of the herd, watching the world transform into something that looks familiar but feels alien. The familiar barnyard becomes a collection of streams and puddles. The comfortable dirt pathways turn into muddy obstacle courses. The predictable world of grass and sunshine becomes a temporary water park designed by someone with no concern for goat convenience. The storm passes eventually, as storms do, leaving behind air that smells washed and electric, puddles that reflect the sky, and a herd of goats who are collectively pretending they weren't just intimidated by weather. The older goats resume their normal activities with studied casualness, as if they weren't just hiding under the same overhang as everyone else. You emerge from the experience with several new pieces of wisdom. Storms are temporary but impressive. Being scared is normal, even if no one talks about it, and getting caught in rain is less comfortable than staying dry, but more educational than you might expect. The summer also brings your first intensive course in human psychology, as you learn to read the farmer's moods with the attention of a meteorologist tracking weather patterns. Humans, you discover, have emotional climates that are equally unpredictable and significantly more confusing than actual weather. Morning human tends to be focused and efficient, moving through chores with the systematic approach of someone following a mental checklist. This is the best time to be a well-behaved goat who doesn't require extra attention or intervention. Afternoon, human is often more relaxed, but also more likely to notice things you'd prefer to keep private, like that small hole you've been working on under the fence, or the mysterious absence of vegetables from the garden. Evening humans vary depending on factors you're still trying to understand, something related to the mysterious activities that happen in the house, the weather, and the behavior of the other animals throughout the day. Sometimes evening human brings treats and scratches ears. Sometimes evening human fixes things that weren't necessarily broken but weren't necessarily working perfectly either. Learning to navigate these human weather patterns becomes as important as learning to navigate the actual weather. Both can significantly impact your comfort and freedom. Both follow patterns that are observable but not entirely predictable. And both require you to adapt your behavior based on conditions beyond your control. By the end of summer, you've developed the basic skills of seasonal survival, finding shade, managing water politics, weathering storms, and reading human moods. These abilities will serve you well as the year continues, its slow rotation toward new challenges and different types of weather, both meteorological and social. 3 months into your existence, your body decides to stage a rebellion against everything you thought you knew about being yourself. This rebellion manifests in several deeply inconvenient ways, starting with the discovery that your voice is apparently enrolled in some sort of experimental music program without consulting you first. You wake up one morning planning to deliver a perfectly ordinary bleat, the kind of confident, "Good morning, world" announcement that you've been perfecting for weeks, and instead produce something that sounds like a rusty bicycle being tortured by a choir of confused geese. The sound that emerges from your throat is so unexpected that you actually look around to see if someone else made it. Despite the obvious fact that it came from your own mouth, your voice cracks during important bleats, which wouldn't be so embarrassing if bleating weren't essentially your only form of communication. It's like being a poet whose voice betrays them mid-recitation, or a singer who can't trust their instrument not to break into an entirely different song without warning. You attempt to call for your mother and produce a sound that starts as a respectable bleat, rises to an ambitious honk, cracks into something resembling a squeaky door, and finishes as a deflated sigh. The timing of these vocal failures is particularly cruel. They never happen during casual, low-stakes conversations. Instead, they occur during moments when you're trying to sound authoritative, warning other goats about approaching humans, calling dibs on a particularly nice patch of clover, or attempting to participate in the complex social negotiations that determine feeding order. Scholar, your philosophical companion, develops his own vocal inconsistencies around the same time, which provides some comfort. Together, you sound like a garage band that hasn't quite learned to tune their instruments, practicing in a space with questionable acoustics. The older goats listen to your attempts at communication with the patience of adults who remember their own awkward phases but have conveniently forgotten how mortifying they felt at the time. Your hooves, meanwhile, seem to have received a growth memo that your brain never saw. Overnight, they transform from appropriately sized feet into something that looks like you've borrowed shoes from a much larger goat and haven't quite figured out how to walk in them. Every step requires careful consideration of where your feet actually are versus where you think they should be. This wouldn't be such a problem if you could simply move more slowly until you adjust. But life on a farm doesn't pause for personal development issues. You still need to navigate around other goats, respond quickly when the farmer calls, and maintain your position in the daily migrations between food sources and comfortable resting spots. Your oversized hooves turn these routine activities into exercises in advanced coordination. You trip over things that weren't there yesterday, rocks that seemed perfectly manageable last week now present major navigation challenges. Gates that you could previously walk through without thinking require careful measurement to ensure you don't clip the sides. Even standing still becomes more complicated when your feet don't quite feel like they belong to you. The most challenging aspect of this growth spurt is that you've entered the awkward phase, where you're too big to be cute, but too small to be taken seriously. The humans who used to think everything you did was adorable now view your activities with mild suspicion, as if you've transformed from charming baby animal to potential troublemaker without any transition period. Your size puts you in a social no man's land. The younger kids still see you as an older goat worthy of respect, but the adult goats consider you essentially a large child who should know better but clearly doesn't. You're expected to behave with more maturity than you feel capable of, while still being dismissed when attempting to participate in serious adult goat business. This in-between status extends to every aspect of farm life. You're too big to fit into some of the comfortable small spaces you used to enjoy, but not quite large enough to reach the things that the bigger goats can access easily. The humans expect you to be more self-sufficient but still intervene when they think you're making poor decisions, which seems to be most of the time. The most surprising discovery of this period is that confidence, you learn, is mostly about how you hold your ears. This revelation comes to you while observing Duchess, whose air of authority you've long admired but never quite understood. Watching her carefully, you notice that her actual abilities aren't dramatically superior to those of other goats, but her ear positioning suggests that she knows exactly what she's doing at all times. Confident goats hold their ears alert but relaxed, angled slightly forward in a way that suggests they're paying attention to important information that others might miss. Uncertain goats let their ears droop or swivel nervously, advertising their confusion to anyone who cares to notice. Nervous goats pin their ears back, which makes them look defensive even when they're just trying to figure out what's happening. You practice confident ear positioning in private, using your reflection in the water trough as a guide. The trick is to look alert without appearing anxious, interested without seeming desperate, and knowledgeable without coming across as arrogant. It's more difficult than it sounds, requiring a level of self-awareness that feels almost theatrical. The practice pays off gradually. When you hold your ears in the confident position while approaching a group of other goats, they're more likely to make space for you. When you maintain alert ear positioning while eating, other goats are less likely to challenge your right to be there. When you listen to the farmer's instructions with properly positioned ears, you're less likely to be singled out for additional attention. This discovery leads to a broader understanding. Much of what you interpreted as natural confidence in other goats is actually learned behavior. They're not inherently more sure of themselves. They've simply figured out how to project certainty even when they're improvising. It's a performance that becomes more natural with practice, like any other skill. By the end of this growth period, your voice has settled into something recognizably. Yours still unpredictable occasionally, but generally reliable for basic communication. Your hooves have achieved a size that matches the rest of your body, even if your brain still occasionally miscalculates where they are. And your ear positioning has developed into a reliable tool for managing social situations. Most importantly, you've learned that growing up is largely a matter of figuring out how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, how to project confidence while you're still learning what you're supposed to be confident about, and how to navigate the strange territory between childhood and adulthood without losing your balance too often. Your first successful fence breach happens on a Tuesday morning when the farmer is distracted by a conversation with the mail carrier that involves a lot of hand gesturing and concerned looks toward the sky. Weather discussions, you've learned, can absorb human attention for impressive lengths of time, creating windows of opportunity for activities that might otherwise require explanation. The great escape of summer begins with your discovery that the gate latch is more of a suggestion than a serious security measure. You've been studying it for weeks, watching the farmer manipulate the metal mechanism with the focused attention of a student preparing for an important exam. The latch operates on a simple principle: lift the lever, push the gate. The complexity lies not in the operation but in the timing. Your breakthrough comes when you realize that your newly developed height allows you to reach the latch while standing on your hind legs. A posture that felt impossible just a month ago, but now falls within your range of achievable awkwardness. The metal is cold against your nose, and the mechanism requires more pressure than you initially anticipate. But the satisfying click of the latch opening sounds like freedom itself. The gate swings open with the dramatic flare of possibility, revealing the world beyond the immediate barnyard in all its unexplored glory. For a moment, you stand at the threshold like an explorer contemplating uncharted territory, weighing the thrill of adventure against the reasonable certainty that this decision will eventually require explanation to authorities. Adventure wins. Your first steps into the broader world feel like walking into a larger version of everything you already know. The grass here grows with the same determination as the grass in your paddock. The sky maintains its familiar position overhead, and the general principles of being a goat continue to apply. Yet everything carries the subtle flavor of transgression, as if the air itself knows you're somewhere you're supposed to ask permission to be. Scholar follows you through the gate with the careful deliberation of someone who wants to be part of the adventure, but also wants to maintain plausible deniability about whose idea it was. Together, you venture into the territory beyond supervision, two goats conducting an unauthorized survey of the extended neighborhood. The discovery of the garden happens 15 minutes into your expedition, when you follow an interesting smell around the corner of the house and find yourself facing what appears to be an outdoor cafeteria, organized with suspicious neatness. Rows of green things grow in carefully planned lines, each plant positioned with the geometric precision that suggests human involvement, but also suggests that humans have somehow created a more organized version of your normal food sources. The lettuce, when you finally work up the courage to try it, tastes like regular lettuce but with the added seasoning of the forbidden. It's crispy, fresh, and carries the psychological enhancement that comes from knowing you're eating something that someone else planned for a different purpose. The tomatoes offer a sweet complexity that's entirely absent from your usual grass-based diet. The herbs provide flavors you didn't know existed, turning your unauthorized snack into an accidental culinary education. You and Scholar work your way through the garden with the methodical approach of food critics conducting a comprehensive review. Everything tastes better when it's supposed to belong to someone else, even when that someone else is your own farmer who presumably grew these things with some vague intention of sharing them eventually. The party ends when you hear the farmer's voice calling your names with the particular tone that suggests your current location has been discovered and your immediate return is expected. The walk back to the gate involves the kind of dignity-preserving pace that allows you to appear cooperative while avoiding any suggestion that you're fleeing the scene of agricultural theft. Your first real predator encounter happens the following week, when the neighbor's cat decides you've become interesting enough to warrant personal investigation. The cat in question is orange, confident, and roughly the size of a small dog, which makes the interaction more diplomatically complex than genuinely threatening but no less educational. The cat approaches with the casual arrogance of something that has never doubted its right to be anywhere it chooses to be. Its walk suggests ownership of everything it surveys, including you, despite the obvious fact that you outweigh it by a considerable margin. This is your introduction to the concept that threat assessment is not always directly correlated with size. The standoff lasts approximately 3 minutes, during which you and the cat engage in the sort of intense mutual staring that usually precedes either violence or mutual respect. The cat's eyes never blink, giving it the unsettling appearance of a furry statue with opinions. Your eyes water from the effort of maintaining eye contact, but you sense that looking away first would constitute some sort of surrender in negotiations you don't fully understand. Scholar watches from what he considers a safe distance, ready to provide moral support or serve as a witness, whichever proves more useful. The other goats observe with the detached interest of an audience watching a play they've seen before, knowing the ending but curious about how this particular performance will unfold. The resolution comes when the cat apparently decides you're adequately impressed by its presence, and walks away with the satisfied air of someone who has successfully made their point. You're left with the understanding that the world contains creatures who operate by entirely different rules than the ones you've learned, and that confidence can be more intimidating than size when deployed with sufficient conviction. Learning to read human moods becomes a survival skill more crucial than weather prediction, and significantly more complex. Humans, you discover, broadcast their emotional states through a combination of vocal tone, walking speed, and the way they handle objects, but the interpretation requires constant calibration and frequent updates. Morning farmer usually moves with purposeful efficiency, but variations in that efficiency can signal everything from mild annoyance to major concern about something you probably don't want to be associated with. The key indicators include the speed of gate closing, faster suggests urgency. The volume of conversation with other humans, louder often means problem-solving mode, and the way tools are handled, careful suggests routine, careless suggests distraction or frustration. You develop a personal early warning system based on these observations, learning to position yourself advantageously when the farmer's mood suggests that being helpful will be appreciated, and to make yourself scarce when the indicators point toward the kind of problem-solving that might involve relocating goats to prevent further complications. This skill proves invaluable for avoiding the particular tone of voice that means explain yourself immediately, and positioning yourself to receive the tone that means you're being remarkably well behaved today. Advanced climbing develops from your earlier experimental scrambling into something approaching actual competence, though advanced in goat terms still occasionally looks like controlled falling to outside observers. The transformation happens gradually, as your legs learn to trust each other, and your brain develops a more realistic relationship with gravity. Your climbing education begins with stumbling over pebbles and progresses through a curriculum that includes logs, rocks, hay bales, and eventually the kind of improbable surfaces that make humans stop what they're doing and take pictures. Each new challenge teaches you something about balance, momentum, and the fine art of calculating whether something that looks climbable actually is climbable, or just optimistically positioned. The secret to goat climbing, you discover, isn't fearlessness. It's the ability to make quick decisions with incomplete information, while maintaining enough flexibility to revise your approach when reality disagrees with your initial assessment. A surface that looks stable might wobble. A route that appears straightforward might require creative problem-solving halfway through. A dismount that seems obvious from below might prove surprisingly complicated from above. You learn to read surfaces like a geologist, testing the stability of rocks with careful hoof placement, evaluating the grip potential of different textures, and developing an intuitive understanding of which angles will support your weight and which will send you sliding backward into an undignified heap. Tree bark offers good grip but can be deceiving when wet. Metal surfaces provide reliable support but can be slippery. Hay bales are forgiving but unstable. Your most impressive climbing achievement is scaling the woodpile beside the barn, a precarious mountain of split logs that shouldn't technically be climbable by anything larger than a squirrel, but somehow accommodates your increasingly confident navigation. The ascent requires a combination of careful route planning, dynamic balance adjustments, and the kind of commitment that makes backing down more dangerous than continuing forward. Scholar watches your climbing adventures with a mixture of admiration and concern, occasionally attempting his own ascents, but generally preferring to serve as ground support and witness. His role proves valuable when you occasionally misjudge a descent, and need someone nearby to confirm that you landed intentionally rather than accidentally. The art of selective hearing develops as a crucial survival skill, when you realize that not every human vocalization requires immediate goat response. Learning to distinguish between calls that demand attention and calls that are merely informational proves essential for maintaining any kind of independence in your daily activities. Here, goats. Delivered in the farmer's morning routine, voice means food is available and responding promptly will be rewarded. The same words delivered in an afternoon tone might mean someone wants to move you somewhere else for reasons that may not align with your current preferences. Get back here means your current activity has been noticed and disapproved of, requiring immediate course correction to avoid escalation. You develop a sophisticated system for evaluating whether a human call requires immediate response, delayed response, or can be safely ignored until more information becomes available. Variables include the time of day, the farmer's recent mood indicators, your current activity level, and the presence of other goats who might respond first, and thereby eliminate the need for your personal involvement. The most advanced level of selective hearing involves appearing to consider responding while actually continuing whatever you were doing, creating the impression of cooperation without the inconvenience of compliance. This technique requires careful calibration too obvious, and you'll be singled out for additional attention. Too subtle, and you might miss genuine emergencies that require all goats to pay attention immediately. Weather prediction becomes one of your most reliable skills, developing into something that's better than the local meteorologist, but less accurate than your joints will eventually become when you're older. You learn to read the subtle signs that precede weather changes. The way the air feels against your skin, the behavior of birds and insects, the quality of light in the sky hours before clouds become visible. Your knees, which you never paid much attention to before, begin providing commentary on atmospheric pressure changes with the reliability of a barometer. A slight ache means rain within 24 hours. A more pronounced discomfort suggests a significant weather system approaching. The complete absence of any sensation indicates that today will probably be boring, meteorologically speaking. This predictive ability proves useful for planning activities that require specific weather conditions, like exploring areas that become muddy when wet, or positioning yourself advantageously for the shelter-seeking behavior that accompanies sudden storms. Being the goat who knows when to head for cover before the rain starts enhances your reputation for practical wisdom. You also learn to predict human weather behavior, which follows patterns that are almost as predictable as actual meteorology. Farmers move with increased urgency before storms, completing outdoor tasks and securing things that might blow around. Hot weather makes humans slower and more likely to provide extra water and shade. Cold weather makes them bundle up in layers and move more quickly between outdoor tasks and indoor warmth. Finding the best sunny spots becomes an advanced course in real estate evaluation, microclimatology, and social dynamics. The prime locations change throughout the day as the sun moves across the sky, creating a dynamic market where this morning's perfect spot becomes afternoon's forgotten corner. You develop expertise in evaluating sun quality based on multiple factors. Duration. How long will this spot remain sunny? Protection. Is it sheltered from wind? Accessibility. Can you reach it without crossing disputed territory? And social dynamics. Are you likely to be challenged for this location by goats with higher status? The truly premium spots combine optimal sun exposure with strategic positioning that allows you to monitor food opportunities, observe interesting activities, and maintain social connections without requiring frequent relocation. A spot near the barn door offers the warmth of reflected heat, plus the entertainment value of watching human activities. A position on the small hill provides excellent sun and superior sightlines for predicting the next herd movement. You learn that the best sunny spots are often found rather than claimed through force, discovered through patient observation and careful timing rather than direct competition with more aggressive goats. Sometimes the choicest locations are hidden in plain sight, overlooked by others because they require a slightly different perspective or a willingness to try something unconventional. Your growing expertise in optimal positioning enhances your overall quality of life and establishes your reputation as a goat who understands the finer points of comfort management, a skill that will serve you well as you continue. Developing into a fully competent adult goat, your first winter arrives like a stern teacher who doesn't believe in easing students into difficult subjects. One morning you wake up and the world has changed personality overnight. The grass is crispy with frost. Your breath creates small clouds that dissipate into the cold air, and staying warm transitions from a casual consideration to a full-time job, requiring strategic planning and constant attention. The cold creeps into everything with the persistence of an unwelcome houseguest. It makes the water in the trough thick and reluctant to flow. It turns the ground hard and unforgiving under your hooves. It transforms the familiar barnyard into a landscape that looks the same but feels entirely different, as if someone has adjusted the fundamental settings of your world without consulting you first. Your first lesson in winter survival comes when you discover that the sunny spots you've spent months perfecting are now essential infrastructure rather than luxury amenities. The patch of ground near the barn's south wall, which was merely pleasant during summer, becomes prime real estate worth defending. The sheltered corner that provided gentle breezes during hot weather now offers crucial protection from winds that seem personally offended by the concept of goat comfort. You learn to layer your activities around warmth conservation with the efficiency of an energy economist. Morning routines begin with evaluating the thermal landscape, where the sun will first touch the ground, which areas remain sheltered from overnight wind, where other goats have already begun generating collective warmth. Feeding times become exercises in balancing nutrition with temperature management, eating enough to fuel your internal heating system while avoiding the lethargy that comes from too much effort in cold conditions. The social dynamics of winter are entirely different from the casual hierarchies of warmer months. Suddenly, sharing body heat becomes a survival strategy that trumps personal space preferences. You find yourself pressed against goats you normally maintain a polite distance from, participating in collective warming efforts that would have seemed uncomfortably intimate during summer, but now feel like essential community cooperation. Scholar proves to be an excellent winter companion, sharing your approach to cold weather management through careful planning rather than stoic endurance. Together, you develop strategies for maximizing warmth while minimizing energy expenditure, perfecting the art of collaborative heat retention and mutual windbreak formation. Learning that boredom is the enemy becomes crucial when the shorter days and less comfortable outdoor conditions reduce your normal activity options. The psychological challenge of winter proves as demanding as the physical requirements, requiring you to develop new forms of entertainment and mental stimulation to prevent the kind of restless energy that leads to poor decision-making and conflict with other goats. You discover that entertainment can be created from almost anything when you approach it with sufficient creativity and determination. A stick becomes a puzzle to be manipulated, carried, and repositioned in different configurations. A pile of hay transforms into architecture, construction material for building more comfortable resting areas and windbreaks. Even the ice that forms in shallow puddles provides opportunities for investigation, offering new textures to explore and physics lessons about temperature and state changes. The art of creating your own entertainment extends to social activities as well. You and Scholar develop elaborate games that can be played in small spaces during weather that makes ranging widely unappealing. Headbutting contests become more strategic and less physical, focusing on technique and precision rather than force. Following games involve complex routes through the barn and surrounding areas, testing memory and navigation skills while generating enough movement to maintain circulation. You also learn to find entertainment in observation, developing a deeper appreciation for the subtle dramas and patterns of farm life. Winter strips away the distractions of abundant food and comfortable weather, making the underlying social structures and individual personalities more visible. You become a student of goat psychology, noting how different individuals respond to cold, how hierarchies shift under stress, and how group decisions emerge from the complex interactions of individual preferences and collective needs. The responsibility of being older hits you with the gradual realization that younger goats have begun looking to you for guidance, which is simultaneously flattering and terrifying. Your opinions carry more weight than they used to. Your behavior is observed and sometimes copied, and your decisions affect not just your own comfort and safety, but also influence the choices made by goats who assume you know what you're doing. This assumption proves optimistic. You're making up most of it as you go along, using experience and observation to guide decisions that often feel like educated guesses. The terrifying part isn't that you don't always know the right answer, it's that the younger goats don't seem to realize this, and continue treating your casual suggestions as expert advice. You learn to project confidence while internally questioning your qualifications for leadership, developing the skill of appearing decisive while actually running through rapid mental calculations about the probable outcomes of different choices. When a young goat asks whether a particular area looks safe to explore, you find yourself evaluating factors you never consciously considered before. Wind patterns, visibility lines, escape routes, and the current mood indicators of nearby humans. The responsibility extends beyond immediate safety decisions to the more subtle aspects of social education. Younger goats watch how you interact with other animals, how you respond to human instructions, how you handle frustration and disappointment. You become aware that your behavior is being studied and sometimes emulated, making you more conscious of setting good examples, even when you'd prefer to experiment with questionable choices. Discovering your personality proves to be the most significant development of this period. Through the accumulated experiences of months of problem-solving, social navigation, and survival challenges, you begin to recognize patterns in your own responses and preferences. You're apparently the type who questions everything not from a desire to be difficult, but from a genuine curiosity about how things work and why they work the way they do. This questioning tendency extends to everything from the logic behind human rules to the efficiency of established goat traditions. You find yourself wondering why certain routines exist, whether alternative approaches might work better, and what assumptions everyone else accepts without examination. This makes you a useful companion for other goats who want to understand their world more deeply, but occasionally puts you at odds with individuals who prefer not to think too hard about why things are the way they are. Your emerging personality combines curiosity with pragmatism, adventure with caution, and independence with social awareness. You're becoming a goat who thinks before acting but isn't paralyzed by overthinking, who respects tradition while remaining open to innovation, and who values both solitude and community, depending on the circumstances. Winter ends with the gradual realization that you've successfully navigated your first major seasonal challenge and emerged with new skills, deeper relationships, and a clearer sense of who you are as an individual goat. Spring will bring new opportunities and different challenges, but you'll meet them with the confidence that comes from proven competence and self-knowledge. The moment you truly become an adult goat happens not with fanfare or ceremony, but on a quiet Tuesday morning, when you realize you've found your favorite spot, that perfect patch of sun-warmed dirt beside the old apple tree, and you're prepared to defend it with the diplomatic sophistication of a seasoned diplomat, backed by the subtle threat of very pointy horns. This isn't just any patch of dirt. This is your patch of dirt, discovered through months of systematic evaluation and field testing. It receives morning sun but isn't scorching by afternoon. It's elevated enough to provide excellent sightlines across the barnyard, but not so prominent that it attracts unwanted attention from humans with projects. The ground is soft enough for comfortable resting but firm enough that you don't sink into mud during wet weather. Most importantly, it's positioned with multiple escape routes, because even the most comfortable spot isn't worth getting trapped during one of the farmer's "let's move all the goats" initiatives. The claiming process itself is surprisingly subtle for something so important. You don't plant a flag or make announcements. Instead, you begin spending increasing amounts of time there, gradually extending the duration of your visits, until other goats begin to associate the space with your presence. You develop routines that naturally bring you to this spot at predictable times, creating a pattern of occupation that establishes precedence without appearing aggressive about it. Learning to defend your space without actually fighting anyone becomes an exercise in diplomatic communication and strategic body language. The key is to project confident ownership while remaining flexible enough to avoid unnecessary conflicts that might escalate beyond what the territory is actually worth. Your defensive strategy relies heavily on presence and timing. When another goat approaches your spot, you don't immediately charge into battle. Instead, you position yourself in a way that acknowledges their approach while making it clear that the space is currently occupied by someone who has no immediate plans to relocate. Your ears remain alert but not defensive, your posture confident but not challenging. You're not looking for a fight, but you're also not advertising availability. Most territorial disputes resolve themselves through this kind of subtle negotiation. The approaching goat evaluates whether they want to invest the energy required to challenge your claim, while you demonstrate that maintaining your position is worth the effort it might take to defend it. Often, the other goat decides that some nearby spot is almost as good and significantly less complicated to obtain. When direct confrontation becomes unavoidable, you've learned that the goal is clear communication rather than total victory. A brief display of your willingness to defend the space, some strategic, head-lowering, confident eye contact, maybe a few steps forward to establish that you're not intimidated, usually conveys the necessary information. Most goats respect this kind of reasonable assertion and redirect their attention to unclaimed territory. The politics of the feed trough prove far more complex than simple territorial defense, involving a sophisticated understanding of timing, social hierarchies, and the fine art of positioning yourself advantageously without appearing to cut in line. The feed trough is not just a source of nutrition. It's a daily theatre where social dynamics play out in real time, where reputations are made and lost, and where the difference between eating well and eating last can significantly impact your quality of life. Timing, you discover, is everything. Arriving too early means standing around looking eager while the farmer prepares the food, which advertises your availability for additional chores or attention. Arriving too late means settling for whatever remains after the more socially adept goats have claimed the choice portions. The optimal approach involves arriving precisely when the food becomes available, which requires you to monitor multiple variables: the farmer's morning routine, the weather conditions that might affect feeding schedule, and the current social temperature of the herd. Position at the trough follows unwritten rules that are more complex than international diplomacy. Duchess naturally assumes her position at the preferred end, where the best food typically gets distributed first. Captain takes his place wherever he can maintain maximum awareness of everything happening around the trough while eating efficiently. The newer goats cluster where they can access food without getting too close to potential conflict zones. Your strategy involves reading the daily social climate and positioning yourself accordingly. On days when tensions are low and everyone seems relaxed, you can position yourself more advantageously. When the herd feels unsettled or hierarchical challenges are brewing, you adopt a more conservative approach that prioritizes avoiding conflict over optimizing food access. Establishing your reputation as The goat who notices things happens gradually, through accumulated instances of being the first to spot interesting developments and the most reliable at providing early warnings about changes in routine or approaching complications. This reputation proves valuable for maintaining your territorial claims and improving your position in various social negotiations. Your observational skills develop from the practical necessity of staying informed about your environment into something approaching expertise. You notice patterns that others miss. The correlation between the farmer's morning mood and the likelihood of fence repairs. The way the chickens behave differently before weather changes. The subtle signs that indicate when new animals might be arriving at the farm. This information becomes social currency when you're the goat who first notices that the gate has been left unlatched, or who spots the farmer approaching with the specific tools that usually mean goat relocation project. Your warnings are valued by other members of the herd. Being useful in this way enhances your social standing and makes other goats more willing to cooperate when you need space, support, or assistance with your own projects. The reputation also provides a certain amount of protection from casual harassment. Goats who might otherwise challenge you for resources or position think twice when they realize you're likely to notice and remember their behavior. Being known as observant creates a subtle deterrent effect that makes direct confrontation less appealing to potential troublemakers. Your territorial success isn't measured in acres conquered or battles won, but in the quiet satisfaction of having a reliable place to rest, eat, and observe the world from a position you've chosen and successfully maintained. It's the difference between being a goat who adapts to whatever space remains available and being a goat who actively shapes his environment to support his preferences and needs. This progression from opportunistic space finding to strategic territory management represents a fundamental shift in how you relate to your world. You're no longer just surviving in whatever circumstances you encounter. You're actively creating the circumstances that support the kind of life you want to live. It's a subtle but crucial difference that marks the transition from adolescent adaptation to adult agency. By the end of your first successful year of territory management, you've established not just a physical space, but a social position that reflects your growing competence and confidence. You're a goat who knows where he belongs and has the skills to maintain that position without unnecessary drama or conflict. Reading the herd becomes your graduate degree in goat psychology, a complex field of study that requires understanding not just individual personalities, but also the dynamic interactions between those personalities under various conditions. You learn to recognize who needs their morning routine undisturbed, who becomes unreliable under stress, and who to follow when the situation requires collective decision-making and quick action. The morning social climate provides essential information for planning your day. Duchess on a bad morning exhibits subtle signs that experienced goats learn to recognize from a distance. Ears held slightly back, a particular way of chewing that suggests irritation, and a tendency to claim more personal space than usual. Approaching her before she's had adequate time to settle into the day ranks somewhere between poor judgment and active self-harm on the scale of social mistakes. Captain, by contrast, wakes up ready for action and decision-making, but his enthusiasm can lead to questionable choices when he hasn't had sufficient information gathering time. Early morning Captain is likely to commit the herd to exploring unknown territories or investigating potentially problematic situations without adequate risk assessment. Following him during his first hour of consciousness requires the kind of courage that's often indistinguishable from poor planning. Scholar develops into your most reliable social weather indicator. His morning demeanor reflects the overall herd mood with the accuracy of a sophisticated emotional barometer. When Scholar seems relaxed and curious, the day will likely proceed smoothly. When he appears cautious or keeps checking the positions of other goats, you know to maintain higher awareness of developing social tensions. You learn to read the subtle signs that indicate when individual goats are having the kind of day that makes them unpredictable. Restless pacing usually means someone is working through a problem that may or may not have a reasonable solution. Excessive grooming often indicates anxiety about something specific. Unusually aggressive eating suggests someone is comfort feeding their way through stress that they can't directly address. Understanding these patterns allows you to navigate the daily social landscape with the skill of a diplomat who's memorized everyone's personality quirks and trigger points. You know who to approach for information, who to avoid when they're processing something complicated, and who can be relied upon for support when you need assistance with your own challenges. Your first leadership moment arrives during what becomes known in herd oral history as the Great March to Better Grass. It begins as a routine morning when the usual pasture seems particularly uninspiring. The grass cropped short from recent heavy use, The ground hard-packed from too many hooves, the general atmosphere suggesting that food quality has declined below acceptable standards. The initial restlessness starts with individual goats standing and looking around, with the vague dissatisfaction of diners, contemplating a menu that doesn't contain anything they really want. This mood spreads through the herd with the inevitable momentum of collective discontent, reaching the point where everyone knows something should be done, but no one wants to take responsibility for deciding what that something should be. Your leadership emerges not from a dramatic moment of inspiration, but from the practical recognition that you've noticed something others haven't. The gate to the far pasture stands slightly ajar, presenting an opportunity for legitimately accessing better grazing without requiring any actual rule breaking or fence breaching. The far pasture has been resting for several weeks, allowing the grass to recover to the kind of lush abundance that makes ordinary pasture seem like a cruel joke. Your moment of decision comes when you realize that pointing out this opportunity will require you to take responsibility for the consequences if the plan doesn't work out as hoped. Leading means accepting that if the farmer disapproves, objects, or relocates everyone back to the original pasture, you'll be remembered as the goat whose idea caused the disruption. The actual leadership involves less dramatic gesturing than you might expect. You simply begin walking toward the far pasture with the confident stride of someone who knows where they're going and why. The key is projecting certainty, while internally hoping that your assessment of the situation proves accurate, and that the farmer won't appear at precisely the wrong moment with projects that require all goats to remain in their current location. Scholar follows first, which provides crucial social validation. When Scholar joins your migration, it signals to the rest of the herd that this isn't a random individual adventure, but a considered group decision worthy of participation. Within minutes, the entire herd is moving toward the far pasture, with the collective enthusiasm of tourists who've discovered an unexpectedly good restaurant. The success of the operation establishes your reputation as a goat, capable of making good decisions under pressure and taking responsibility for outcomes. This reputation proves valuable in future situations, requiring collective action or individual initiative. Other goats begin looking to you for guidance when the standard routines don't address current conditions. Learning when to blend in and when to stand out becomes essential for maintaining your social position without creating unnecessary conflicts or drawing unwanted attention from humans who might have strong opinions about independent goat. Decision making. The skill involves reading not just the immediate social situation, but also the broader context of farm operations and human moods. Blending in proves useful when the farmer is conducting one of his periodic counts or inspections that might result in individual goats being singled out for closer examination. During these times, appearing unremarkable and cooperative helps ensure that you remain part of the anonymous group rather than becoming a specific goat requiring specific attention. Standing out becomes valuable when circumstances require someone to take initiative or when your particular skills are needed for collective problem solving. Your reputation for noticing things makes you valuable during situations where the herd needs advance, warning about approaching changes or potential opportunities. Mastering the art of the strategic retreat proves essential for maintaining your social position and physical well-being when confrontations escalate beyond what diplomacy can resolve. The key insight is recognizing the difference between situations where persistence will eventually lead to success and situations where continued engagement will only result in unnecessary injury, embarrassment, or social damage. The strategic retreat is not the same as surrender. It's a tactical decision that preserves your ability to engage more effectively at a later time when conditions are more favorable. This might mean yielding a disputed feeding position today in order to maintain the social relationships that will allow you to claim a better position tomorrow. The art lies in executing the retreat in a way that preserves dignity, while clearly communicating that you're choosing to disengage rather than being forced to flee. The difference is subtle, but socially significant, affecting how other goats perceive your future challenges and negotiations. Spring arrives like a party crasher, carrying hormones and questionable decision-making capabilities, transforming the previously rational social dynamics of the herd into something resembling a soap opera, written by someone who's never met actual goats, but has strong opinions about dramatic tension and romantic comedy. The seasonal shift doesn't announce itself gradually. One morning you wake up and the world smells different, not just the familiar sense of warming earth and growing grass, but something else entirely, something that makes your brain feel slightly disconnected from your usual logical processes. The air carries information that your body understands, but your mind hasn't quite figured out how to interpret, creating a persistent sense that something important is happening. but you're not entirely sure what you're supposed to do about it. The other goats begin behaving strangely, as if someone has secretly replaced their personalities with slightly more dramatic versions of themselves. Duchess develops an inexplicable interest in grooming herself more thoroughly than usual, spending considerable time arranging her appearance with the focus of someone preparing for an important social event. Captain's usual confidence transforms into something more like strutting, as if he's auditioning for a role that requires projecting strength and competence to an imaginary audience. Even Scholar, your reliable source of rational companionship, begins exhibiting uncharacteristic behavior. He spends more time than usual positioning himself where he can observe the female goats without appearing to stare, and his normally thoughtful approach to decision-making becomes occasionally impulsive in ways that suggest his internal advisory committee has been infiltrated by voices advocating for choices that don't make logical sense. Your own transformation sneaks up on you with the stealth of a practical joke orchestrated by your endocrine system. Suddenly, goats you've known for months become interesting in entirely new ways. The way sunlight hits their coats seems worth noting. Their walking patterns become subjects for extended observation. Conversations that used to focus on practical matters like food quality and weather predictions begin incorporating entirely different priorities. The mating dance, when you finally encounter it, proves to be nature's way of making everyone uncomfortable, while simultaneously ensuring the continuation of the species. It's an elaborate performance that combines elements of theatre, athletics, and psychological warfare, conducted by participants who seem to be making up the rules as they go along, while pretending they've been trained professionals all their lives. Your first attempt at romantic expression involves a complex display that you hope conveys confidence, strength, and general worthiness as a potential partner. The performance includes strategic positioning to demonstrate your best physical attributes, carefully choreographed movements that showcase your agility and coordination, and what you believe are meaningful looks that communicate your serious intentions and stable character. The reality of your romantic debut feels more like trying to dance while someone else controls your legs, and you're not sure what music you're supposed to be dancing to. Your carefully planned movements become awkward shuffling. Your meaningful looks probably convey confusion rather than smouldering intensity. Your attempts to demonstrate strength and agility result in minor collisions with immovable objects, and the kind of recovery efforts that draw attention to your mistakes rather than your capabilities. The object of your romantic interest, a goat you've privately named Grace for her effortless elegance and apparent immunity to the social awkwardness that plagues everyone else, watches your performance with what you hope is interest, but suspect might be polite confusion. Her own approach to the seasonal changes seems to involve becoming even more graceful and composed than usual, as if she's decided to handle romance through the strategic application of dignity and poise. Learning that love is temporary but embarrassment is forever becomes clear through a series of romantic gestures that seem brilliant in conception but prove questionable in execution. Your attempts to demonstrate worthiness include bringing Grace the choicest pieces of hay, positioning yourself protectively when any perceived threats approach, and developing an elaborate routine of checking on her well-being that probably looks more like stalking than caring to outside observers. The competition for Grace's attention involves several other goats who approach romance with strategies ranging from Captain's direct assertiveness to Scholar's intellectual courtship techniques to the mysterious appeal of a new goat named Rebel, whose recent arrival and impressive horn development have disrupted the established social calculations about who might be considered most eligible. Rebel represents everything you're not: effortlessly confident, naturally charismatic, and apparently born knowing how to project the kind of casual competence that makes everyone else's efforts look forced and overly calculated. His approach to courtship involves simply being himself, which proves devastatingly effective in ways that make your elaborate strategies seem unnecessary and slightly ridiculous. Your first heartbreak arrives with the crushing realization that Grace has chosen Rebel, apparently based on criteria that have nothing to do with your careful demonstrations of reliability, resourcefulness, and dedication to her comfort and safety. The selection process appears to have involved factors you didn't know were being evaluated, using standards you didn't realize existed, reaching a conclusion that makes perfect sense to everyone except you. The heartbreak feels less like the dramatic emotional devastation you might have expected, and more like the social equivalent of walking into a door you didn't see coming. The impact is real and uncomfortable, but the primary damage is to your pride rather than your fundamental well-being. You're disappointed rather than destroyed, confused rather than devastated. Recovery involves the gradual recognition that romantic failure is a learning experience rather than a permanent judgment on your character or future prospects. Grace's choice doesn't mean you're fundamentally inadequate. It means that this particular combination of personalities and preferences didn't align in your favor. The disappointment teaches you about resilience, about the difference between genuine compatibility and wishful thinking, and about the importance of maintaining your sense of self-worth, independent of external validation. The spring romance season ends with the understanding that while love might be temporary, the social skills you develop while pursuing it prove more durable and transferable than the emotions that motivated their development. You've learned to read social situations more accurately, to present yourself more effectively, and to handle rejection with dignity rather than drama. Most importantly, you've discovered that your identity doesn't depend on romantic success or social approval. You're still the goat who notices things, who can be relied upon for good judgment and practical solutions, who has claimed and maintained his own territory through competence rather than aggression. Romance is just one aspect of a full life, not the determining factor in whether that life is worth living. By the end of your second year, you've developed into something approaching a goat professional, mastering the advanced techniques that separate competent adult goats from the enthusiastic amateurs you once counted yourself among. Your escape techniques have evolved from accidental fence breaching to the kind of sophisticated operation that would impress Houdini if Houdini had hooves and a philosophical interest in exploring unauthorized territories. The foundation of advanced escape techniques lies not in brute force or reckless abandon, but in patient observation and systematic analysis of security weaknesses. You've learned to think like a goat engineer, evaluating the structural integrity of barriers, identifying stress points and design flaws, and developing contingency plans for various scenarios involving gates, latches, and the eternal challenge of human-designed containment systems that clearly weren't tested by actual goats. Your gate expertise now includes a comprehensive understanding of latch mechanisms, from the simple lift and push designs that yield to persistent nose pressure, to the more complex systems that require sequential operations, and occasionally, the kind of teamwork that makes escape attempts into collaborative engineering projects. You can assess a gate's security level within moments of examination, categorizing it somewhere on the spectrum from polite suggestion to actual impediment requiring creative problem solving. Fence analysis has become one of your specialized skills. You've learned to identify which fence posts have been compromised by weather, which wire tensions indicate possible failure points, and which sections have been repaired with the kind of temporary solutions that become permanent through administrative oversight rather than engineering integrity. Your mental map of the farm includes detailed notation about which barriers are genuinely secure and which exist more for psychological than physical containment. The psychological aspect of escape techniques proves as important as the mechanical elements. You've learned to time your explorations to coincide with periods when human attention is focused elsewhere, to conduct reconnaissance without appearing to case the joint, and to execute escapes with the casual confidence of someone who has legitimate business being wherever they're going. Weather wisdom develops into something approaching meteorological expertise, though your forecasting methods rely more on organic indicators than technological instruments. You've become fluent in the language of atmospheric pressure, as translated through your joints, the vocabulary of wind patterns, as expressed through the behavior of leaves and smaller animals, and the grammar of precipitation, as written in the movement of clouds and the quality of light. Your most reliable weather prediction technique involves monitoring the chickens, whose behavior changes with the precision of biological barometers in response to approaching atmospheric disturbances. Chickens feeding more aggressively than usual indicate significant weather changes within 12 to 18 hours. Chickens seeking shelter without obvious cause suggest that conditions will deteriorate more rapidly than human forecasts typically predict. Chickens, acting nervous and clustered, mean that today's outdoor plans should be reconsidered in favor of activities that don't require extended exposure to whatever nature is preparing to deliver. The correlation between chicken anxiety levels and storm intensity proves remarkably accurate, more reliable than the weather service, and certainly more entertaining than checking atmospheric readings on human devices. You've learned to calibrate your own activity planning based on poultry psychology, scheduling major explorations for times when the chickens seem relaxed and confident about their immediate future. Human psychology becomes your most advanced area of study, developing into an understanding that surpasses most humans' comprehension of their own behavioral patterns. You've learned to read the subtle indicators that predict human decision-making with accuracy that would seem psychic if it weren't based on careful observation of patterns that humans themselves don't seem to notice. Morning human operates according to routines that vary predictably, based on factors including day of the week, weather conditions, and the mysterious cycles that govern human energy levels and mood states. You can predict with reasonable accuracy when morning human will be focused on efficiency versus when attention will be available for non-essential interactions, like voluntary goat entertainment or spontaneous project development. Afternoon human follows different patterns entirely, influenced by factors that seem to include food consumption, temperature, and the success or failure of morning activities. Understanding these patterns allows you to position yourself advantageously for treats, attention, or simply avoiding involvement in projects that require goat participation but don't necessarily benefit goat interests. The most advanced level of human psychology involves predicting their responses to goat behavior, allowing you to calibrate your activities to achieve desired outcomes. When you want to be left alone, you can project the kind of calm competence that suggests supervision is unnecessary. When you want attention or treats, you can deploy the calculated charm that communicates worthiness of special consideration without appearing demanding or manipulative. The Zen of eating represents your most philosophical achievement, transforming the basic necessity of nutrition into something approaching meditative practice. You've learned to find peace in the simple act of chewing cud, discovering that the rhythmic process of reprocessing food creates a natural state of contemplation that clarifies thinking and reduces stress more effectively than any human relaxation technique. Cud chewing meditation involves more than passive rumination. It's an active practice of mindful attention to the present moment, focusing on the texture and flavor of food as it undergoes transformation, the rhythm of jaw movement as it creates steady patterns of activity, and the overall sense of peaceful productivity that comes from accomplishing something essential while requiring no external stimulation or entertainment. This practice proves particularly valuable during periods of waiting, those inevitable stretches of time when humans are busy with their mysterious indoor activities, when weather makes outdoor exploration unappealing, or when social dynamics require you to maintain a low profile until situations stabilize. Instead of experiencing these periods as boring or frustrating, you've learned to use them as opportunities for the kind of peaceful reflection that busy goats rarely have time to pursue. The meditation aspect extends beyond the physical act of eating to encompass a broader appreciation for the simple satisfactions available in ordinary moments. The warmth of sun on your back, the texture of earth under your hooves, the social comfort of being part of a herd. These experiences become sources of genuine contentment when approached with the right kind of attention. Your mastery of these life skills represents more than technical competence. It reflects the development of wisdom about how to live well within the circumstances you've been given, how to find satisfaction in ordinary experiences, and how to maintain your sense of individual agency while honoring your social responsibilities as a member of the larger goat community. Your third year marks the arrival of something you never thought you'd possess. That perfect goat swagger, the kind of effortless confidence that makes everything you do look intentional, even when you're mostly improvising your way through situations you've never encountered before. It's not arrogance. Arrogance is what young goats display when they think they know more than they actually do. This is different. This is the quiet assurance that comes from having survived enough mistakes to recognize the difference between problems worth worrying about and problems that will resolve themselves given sufficient time and patience. The swagger manifests in how you move through space, no longer calculating each step or questioning your right to be wherever you are. Your hooves touch the ground with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where they're going, even when they're just wandering around looking for something interesting to investigate. Your head carriage suggests that you're monitoring important information that others might miss, which isn't entirely inaccurate but also isn't entirely conscious. The confidence has become natural rather than performed, automatic rather than deliberate. Other goats begin seeking your opinion on important matters, particularly questions involving risk assessment and edibility evaluation. Is that edible? Becomes a question you hear regularly, usually posed by younger goats who've discovered something that looks potentially nutritious, but also potentially problematic. Your reputation for food wisdom develops partly from experience and partly from your systematic approach to testing unknown substances. Starting with careful observation, progressing through cautious sampling, and concluding with either confident consumption or decisive rejection. The truth is that much of your food expertise consists of educated guessing, informed by pattern recognition. But this is more reliable than it sounds. You've learned to identify the visual and olfactory indicators that correlate with digestibility, toxicity, and general nutritional value. Plants with certain leaf patterns tend to be safe. Mushrooms require extreme caution. Anything the chickens won't eat deserves serious skepticism. These heuristics aren't perfect, but they're better than random experimentation and significantly safer than the trial and error methods favoured by goats with more enthusiasm than judgment. Your legendary status becomes cemented by the rosebush incident, an adventure that begins as routine exploration and evolves into the kind of story that gets retold, with increasing dramatic embellishment each time someone needs an example of ambitious consumption choices and their consequences. The rosebush in question grows beside the garden fence, loaded with blooms that smell fascinating and look like they might qualify as gourmet dining for goats with sophisticated palates. The decision to eat the entire rosebush isn't planned as a statement or a challenge. It starts with a few experimental bites that prove surprisingly palatable, continues with the gradual realization that the thorns are manageable with careful technique, and escalates into systematic consumption based on the practical philosophy that if something is worth eating, it's worth eating thoroughly. The project takes most of an afternoon and attracts an audience of other goats who watch with the fascination of spectators witnessing something they're not sure is impressive or alarming. The aftermath involves several days of careful monitoring for adverse effects, during which you maintain outward confidence while internally questioning the wisdom of consuming quite so many thorns. The fact that you suffer no lasting consequences and actually seem to thrive on your unconventional meal establishes your reputation as a goat with an iron constitution and questionable judgment, both of which prove valuable for leadership purposes. Learning that leadership is mostly about looking confident while improvising becomes clear through repeated experiences where other goats look to you for guidance, in situations where you have no more information than anyone else but are expected to make decisions anyway. Leadership, you discover, isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to make the best decision possible with incomplete information while accepting responsibility for the outcomes. A key insight is that most leadership situations don't have obviously correct solutions. They have various possible approaches with different advantages and risks, and someone needs to choose a direction so the group can move forward rather than standing around debating indefinitely. Your role becomes less about knowing what to do and more about being willing to decide what to do, implementing the decision with confidence, and adjusting course when new information becomes available. This responsibility proves simultaneously flattering and terrifying. Other goats trust your judgment, which feels good until you realize that your judgment is often based on intuition, incomplete analysis, and educated guessing, rather than comprehensive knowledge or infallible wisdom. The terrifying part isn't that you sometimes make mistakes. It's that other goats don't seem to realize how much of your leadership consists of confident improvisation, backed by willingness to take responsibility for consequences. Your leadership style develops around transparency, about uncertainty, combined with decisiveness about action. When another goat asks whether a particular area is safe to explore, you share your assessment of the visible risks while acknowledging that you can't guarantee the outcome. When the herd needs to choose between two grazing areas, you explain your reasoning while making it clear that you're choosing based on best available information rather than perfect knowledge. This approach proves more effective than trying to project omniscience or infallibility. Other goats appreciate honesty about limitations, and they're more likely to contribute their own observations and insights when they don't feel like they're challenging an expert's authority. Leadership becomes collaborative rather than autocratic, based on collective wisdom rather than individual brilliance. The peak years represent a sweet spot between the uncertainty of youth and the physical limitations that will eventually come with age. You have enough experience to handle most situations competently, enough confidence to make decisions without excessive second-guessing, and enough energy to implement your choices with enthusiasm. You're old enough to be trusted with responsibility, but young enough to enjoy the adventures that leadership sometimes requires. Your reputation spreads beyond the immediate herd to include the chickens, who regard you as a reliable source of information about potential threats and interesting developments. The farm dog acknowledges your presence with the respect accorded to an established neighborhood resident rather than a temporary visitor. Even the farmer seems to view you as a stabilizing influence, someone who can be counted on to keep the other goats from pursuing the kind of creative projects that require human intervention to resolve. This recognition feels satisfying in ways you didn't expect. You're not just surviving anymore, you're contributing to the overall success and stability of the farm community. Your decisions affect not only your own comfort and safety, but also the well-being of other animals who look to you for guidance, information, and leadership. The responsibility doesn't feel burdensome because it's balanced by the satisfaction of competence and the pleasure of being useful to others. You've become the goat you used to look up to, the one who seemed to understand how everything worked and always knew what to do next. The secret, you now realize, is that nobody ever completely figures it out. You just get better at improvising with confidence and accepting responsibility for the results. By your 4th year, the fence transitions from a legitimate boundary requiring respect and caution to something more resembling a polite suggestion that you can choose to honor or diplomatically ignore, depending on your current projects and the general mood of the humans responsible for farm management. This shift represents not rebellious disregard for authority, but rather the confident boundary testing of someone who understands the difference between rules that matter and rules that exist mostly out of habit. Your territorial expansion begins conservatively, with brief explorations just beyond the established perimeter to test whether anyone notices or cares about minor boundary adjustments. These reconnaissance missions provide valuable intelligence about the enforcement mechanisms surrounding various farm rules and regulations. Some boundaries are monitored actively, and violations result in immediate corrective action. Others exist more as guidelines that receive attention only when violations become obvious or problematic. The systematic approach to expansion involves careful observation of human patrol patterns, identification of low-visibility routes that allow movement without attracting attention, and development of contingency plans for retreat when circumstances require rapid return to officially sanctioned areas. You're not trying to escape permanently or cause problems. You're simply expanding your operational territory to include resources and opportunities that aren't available within the traditional grazing areas. Your domain grows to include the compost pile, a discovery that transforms your understanding of both nutrition and property rights. The compost pile represents a treasure trove of partially decomposed organic matter that offers flavors and textures unavailable through conventional grazing. Carrot peels, apple cores, and various kitchen scraps create a diverse menu that makes regular grass seem monotonous by comparison. The compost pile discovery establishes an important principle. Your rules apply to territories you discover through your own initiative and investigation. Since you're the goat who identified this resource and developed the techniques for accessing it safely, you naturally become the authority figure responsible for determining usage policies and access protocols. This isn't a formal appointment, it's the practical result of being first to recognize an opportunity and most committed to maximizing its potential. Your compost pile management strategy balances personal enjoyment with community relations, allowing other goats access while maintaining final authority over distribution during peak demand periods. When particularly choice items appear in the pile, you establish priority based on a combination of social standing, recent cooperation with your various projects, and general principles of fairness that maintain herd harmony without undermining your position as primary stakeholder. Establishing trade relations with the chickens represents a diplomatic breakthrough that benefits both species, while demonstrating your growing sophistication in interspecies negotiation. The chickens possess excellent intelligence networks regarding human activities, insect population fluctuations, and weather pattern changes. You offer pest control services and selective sharing of information about food sources that chickens might not discover independently. The pest control agreement involves your systematic trampling of areas where harmful insects tend to concentrate, reducing populations that might otherwise damage chicken food sources or create health hazards. In exchange, the chickens provide early warning about approaching humans, weather changes, and interesting developments in areas you can't monitor directly. They also share information about which areas have been recently treated with substances that might affect grazing safety. This arrangement proves more complex than simple service exchange. It requires ongoing relationship maintenance, regular communication about changing needs and capabilities, and occasional renegotiation when circumstances change. The chickens prove surprisingly sophisticated negotiators, capable of adjusting their contributions based on the value they receive, and willing to withdraw cooperation when they feel the arrangement isn't meeting their needs adequately. The great détente with the farm dog evolves from mutual antagonism through wary coexistence to something approaching respectful indifference. The transformation begins with your recognition that the dog's primary concerns involve territory protection and maintaining social order rather than personal hostility toward goats specifically. Understanding his motivations allows you to modify your behavior in ways that reduce conflict without compromising your own legitimate activities. The dog, whose name you eventually learn is Rex, but whom you privately call Patrol, due to his systematic approach to farm security, operates according to clear but previously mysterious protocols. He doesn't object to goat activities that stay within established boundaries, maintain reasonable noise levels, and don't interfere with his own responsibilities. Problems arise when goats engage in behavior that creates additional work for him, or challenges his authority in areas he considers his jurisdiction. Your diplomatic breakthrough involves a series of small gestures that demonstrate respect for his position, while asserting your own legitimate interests. You avoid his preferred patrol routes during his scheduled rounds, acknowledge his presence with subtle body language that indicates awareness without submission, and occasionally provide information about unusual activities or potential problems that might require his attention. The détente benefits both parties. Rex gains a reliable source of intelligence about goat activities and potential problems, allowing him to focus his attention on genuine security concerns rather than routine goat behavior. You gain freedom to operate within expanded boundaries without constant supervision or intervention, plus occasional protection from his presence when other predators or problematic animals enter the farm. This relationship demonstrates that territorial expansion doesn't require conflict or dominance. It can be achieved through mutual understanding, respect for others' legitimate interests, and creative problem solving that benefits all parties involved. Your 5th year brings the recognition that you've become a genuine connoisseur of weather patterns, capable of reading atmospheric conditions with the sophistication of a meteorologist who uses biological instruments rather than technological equipment. Each season carries its own personality, its own opportunities and challenges, its own rhythm that shapes both daily activities and long-term planning strategies. Spring arrives each year like an optimistic friend who's forgotten about last year's disappointments and believes this time everything will work out perfectly. It's the season of ambitious plans and questionable decision-making, when the warming air and lengthening days create an intoxicating sense of possibility that temporarily overrides the practical wisdom accumulated through previous experiences. With spring's tendency to overpromise and underdeliver, spring optimism manifests in the herd's collective willingness to venture farther from shelter, explore areas that seem too risky during winter, and commit to projects that require sustained good weather to complete successfully. The mild temperatures and fresh grass create a sense of abundance that makes everyone forget about the resource scarcity and social tensions that characterized the previous winter. New growth everywhere suggests that this year will be different, better, more productive than any previous year. The questionable decision-making begins early, usually with someone deciding that it's warm enough to graze in exposed areas that will become uncomfortably windy when the weather inevitably changes. Spring weather operates like a politician during campaign season, making promises about future conditions that sound believable but rarely survive contact with reality. You've learned to enjoy spring optimism while maintaining healthy skepticism about its sustainability. Your role during spring involves tempering collective enthusiasm with practical caution, encouraging reasonable risk-taking while discouraging projects that require perfect weather conditions to succeed. This makes you temporarily unpopular with goats, who want to believe that this spring will be different, but ultimately appreciated when the inevitable cold snaps and unexpected storms vindicate your conservative approach. Summer transforms the farm into a different world entirely, where shade becomes currency more valuable than food and water. Politics intensify beyond anything previously experienced during more temperate seasons. The abundant grass of spring gives way to vegetation that requires strategic planning to access and consume efficiently. The long days create extended opportunities for activity, but also extended exposure to heat that can become dangerous without proper management. Your summer expertise involves comprehensive knowledge of microclimates, understanding which areas receive cooling breezes at different times of day, which surfaces reflect heat versus those that absorb and radiate it, and which water sources remain cool enough for comfortable drinking throughout the hottest periods. This information becomes social currency that you can trade for cooperation, favor, and enhanced status within the herd hierarchy. The water trough politics of summer require diplomatic skills that would challenge professional negotiators. Every goat wants access to the coolest, freshest water at the precise moment when their personal heat management reaches critical levels. But the trough can only accommodate a limited number of users simultaneously. Your reputation for fair-minded leadership makes you a natural mediator for disputes involving timing, duration, and priority access during peak demand periods. Managing summer heat becomes a full-time occupation, requiring constant adjustment of position, activity level, and social interactions based on current conditions and predicted changes. You develop expertise in reading the subtle signs that indicate when heat stress is approaching dangerous levels in yourself and others. Learning to recognize the early warning signals that require immediate intervention versus the manageable discomfort that can be tolerated with appropriate adjustments. Fall arrives with the melancholy beauty of a season that knows it's temporary, bringing the bittersweet satisfaction of successful harvest, combined with the psychological challenge of preparing for inevitable discomfort. The changing light creates spectacular visual effects that make ordinary landscapes look like carefully arranged art, but the shorter days and cooling temperatures serve as persistent reminders that comfortable outdoor living is approaching its annual expiration date. Fall preparation requires balancing present enjoyment with future necessity, making decisions about resource allocation and energy expenditure that will determine comfort levels during the challenging months ahead. Your experience with previous falls allows you to guide less experienced goats through the psychological and practical adjustments required for successful transition from summer abundance to winter austerity. The melancholy aspect of fall isn't depression, it's the thoughtful sadness that comes from recognizing the temporary nature of good times and the inevitability of challenges ahead. This recognition makes the remaining pleasant days more precious and encourages a level of mindful appreciation that might be absent during periods when comfort feels permanent and secure. Winter arrives as the ultimate test of everything you've learned about survival, resource management, and community cooperation. It's survival mode implemented with style, combining practical necessity with aesthetic awareness, maintaining dignity while adapting to circumstances that reduce most activities to their essential components. Your winter expertise encompasses comprehensive knowledge of thermal management, from the micro-level strategies involving body position and breathing techniques to the macro-level planning that determines shelter, utilization, and activity scheduling. You understand which materials provide the best insulation value, which positions optimize heat retention, and which activities generate sufficient internal warmth to justify their energy expenditure. The style component of winter survival involves maintaining social connections and individual identity, despite the pressure to reduce everything to basic survival functions. Winter doesn't have to be merely endured, it can be experienced with grace, approached as a season with its own unique pleasures and opportunities, rather than simply a period of deprivation between more comfortable times. Your seasonal expertise makes you valuable to the entire farm community, not just the goat herd. Your weather predictions help everyone plan activities more effectively. Your resource management knowledge prevents waste during abundance and ensures adequacy during scarcity, and your psychological insight helps maintain morale during the challenging periods that test individual resilience and community bonds. Each season teaches different lessons about adaptation, planning, and the balance between individual needs and collective welfare, creating a comprehensive education in sustainable living that serves you well year after year. Your 6th year brings the peculiar experience of watching new kids make exactly the same mistakes you made during your own early development, creating a mixture of nostalgic amusement and mild frustration, as you observe obvious problems approaching with the inevitability of historical repetition. The new kids display the same overconfidence in their abilities, the same tendency to ignore obvious warning signs, and the same commitment to learning through direct experience, rather than accepting guidance from goats who've already navigated these particular challenges. You watch a particularly ambitious young goat eyeing the electric fence with the same curious confidence you remember feeling before your own shocking introduction to the concept of boundaries with consequences. The urge to intervene battles with the recognition that some lessons can't be taught. They have to be learned through personal experience, however uncomfortable that experience might prove to be. Your decision-making about intervention follows principles you've developed through trial and error. Physical safety issues require immediate action, regardless of the educational value of natural consequences. Social mistakes can usually be allowed to play out naturally, since the cost of learning is manageable, and the lessons tend to stick better when discovered independently. Situations involving potential conflict with humans or other animals fall somewhere in between, requiring judgment calls based on the severity of probable outcomes. The satisfaction of being right about things, particularly weather-related predictions, provides one of the unexpected pleasures of accumulated experience. When you mention that the afternoon feels like rain, and the other goats dismiss your assessment as overly cautious, the vindication of being correct creates a quiet satisfaction that compensates for the occasional discomfort of being right about things other people prefer not to hear. Your weather accuracy has improved to the point where even the farmer occasionally seems to check your behavior before making decisions about outdoor projects. When you seek shelter earlier than usual, he's learned to consider whether postponing fence repairs might be advisable. When you seem particularly interested in staying near the barn, he evaluates whether today's plans should be adjusted to account for potential weather complications. This recognition feels gratifying not because you enjoy being right, but because accurate prediction serves a useful function for the entire farm community. Your weather sensitivity helps everyone make better decisions about resource allocation, activity planning, and preparation for changing conditions. Being right about weather isn't personal vindication, it's community service that happens to come with the side benefit of occasional validation. Learning when to intervene versus when to let others figure things out becomes one of your most important leadership skills, requiring constant calibration between helpful guidance and protective interference. Too much intervention prevents others from developing their own problem-solving abilities and decision-making confidence. Too little intervention allows preventable problems to escalate into situations that could have been avoided with timely guidance. Your approach involves offering information rather than solutions, sharing observations rather than directives, and asking questions that help others think through situations, rather than providing answers that eliminate the need for independent thought. When a younger goat is considering a potentially problematic decision, you might mention relevant factors they haven't considered rather than telling them what they should do. This technique respects others' autonomy while ensuring they have access to information that might affect their decision-making. Whether they choose to use that information becomes their responsibility, but the availability of relevant experience and perspective helps them make more informed choices than they could manage in isolation. The quiet pride of being the goat who survived everything so far provides a steady foundation of confidence that underlies all your interactions and decisions. You've weathered multiple seasons, navigated various social challenges, adapted to changes in farm management and herd composition, and maintained your health and social standing through circumstances that tested your resilience and resourcefulness. This survival isn't just about physical endurance, it's about psychological adaptability, social competence, and the kind of practical wisdom that develops through accumulated experience with diverse challenges. You've learned when to adapt and when to persist, when to lead and when to follow, when to take risks, and when to prioritize safety. The pride doesn't manifest as arrogance or superiority over younger or less experienced goats. Instead, it provides internal stability that allows you to approach new challenges with confidence based on proven capability rather than untested optimism. You know you can handle whatever comes next because you've successfully handled everything that came before. Your survival story isn't dramatic. There were no life or death adventures, no heroic rescues, no moments of spectacular triumph over overwhelming odds. Your story is the more common but equally valuable narrative of steady competence, consistent good judgment, and reliable adaptation to changing circumstances over an extended period. This type of success might seem boring compared to more dramatic alternatives, but it provides the foundation for long-term satisfaction and community contribution that flashier achievements often can't sustain. You've become the type of goat that others can depend on, the steady presence that helps maintain stability and continuity in a world that's constantly changing around the edges, while remaining fundamentally recognizable at its core. The wisdom and weariness of experience combine to create a perspective that's neither optimistic nor pessimistic, but realistic, aware of both possibilities and limitations, prepared for both success and disappointment, committed to both individual growth and community welfare. Your 7th year arrives not with dramatic announcement, but with the quiet persistence of changes that accumulate so gradually you don't notice them. Until one morning, you realize that your knees have developed opinions about tomorrow's weather, and they're not particularly optimistic about what they're predicting. The transformation from young adult to mature goat happens like the changing of seasons, imperceptible day to day, but undeniable when you look back over the distance you've traveled. Your joints become unpaid weather forecasters, providing atmospheric pressure reports with the reliability of expensive meteorological equipment and the unwelcome accuracy of truth-telling you never requested. The left knee specializes in predicting rain within 18 hours, delivering its forecast through a distinctive ache that starts subtle and builds to urgent as storm systems approach. Your right shoulder has developed expertise in detecting temperature drops, beginning its commentary approximately 6 hours before cold fronts arrive and continuing its observations until conditions stabilize. This biological weather station operates whether you want weather information or not, providing continuous updates about atmospheric conditions that transform routine activities into exercises in meteorological awareness. Rising from your favorite resting spot requires preliminary assessment of what your various joints are reporting about current and predicted conditions. Planning activities involves consulting internal forecasts that prove more accurate than the farmer's radio weather reports, but significantly less optimistic about outdoor prospects. The younger goat's energy becomes simultaneously amusing and exhausting, like watching enthusiastic actors perform a play you've seen many times before, but with variations that make each performance interesting despite the familiar plot. Their endless capacity for activity and adventure reminds you of your own youth, while making you grateful for the wisdom that allows you to appreciate comfortable inactivity. You watch young goats bouncing around the pasture with the manic enthusiasm of individuals who haven't yet learned that energy is a finite resource that should be allocated thoughtfully rather than expended randomly. Their approach to problem solving involves immediate action and maximum effort, while your accumulated experience suggests that many problems resolve themselves if you wait patiently and conserve energy for situations that actually require intervention. The entertainment value of observing youthful enthusiasm balances against the occasional weariness that comes from being expected to participate in activities that no longer seem worth the energy expenditure they require. When young goats propose ambitious exploration projects or elaborate games that involve extensive running and jumping, your internal cost-benefit analysis increasingly concludes that comfort outweighs adventure in the hierarchy of current priorities. You develop strong opinions about optimal napping positions with the passionate intensity that younger goats typically reserve for territorial disputes and mating competitions. The perfect napping spot requires specific combinations of warmth, comfort, protection from wind, and strategic positioning that allows you to monitor your surroundings without requiring full alertness or immediate response capability. Your napping expertise encompasses detailed knowledge of how different surfaces affect comfort levels, which positions provide the best support for aging joints, and how to orient yourself to maximize thermal efficiency while maintaining social awareness. The patch of ground near the apple tree that receives morning sun but afternoon shade has become your specialized territory, claimed through consistent use and defended through the quiet authority that comes with established routine rather than aggressive confrontation. The science of comfortable napping extends beyond simple position selection to include timing considerations, duration optimization, and the subtle art of appearing alert while actually dozing. This skill proves particularly valuable during periods when the farmer is conducting activities that might require goat attention, but probably don't require active goat participation. Food transitions from adventure to digestion management, shifting from "what interesting things can I discover and consume" to "what will provide adequate nutrition without causing digestive complications." Your palate becomes more refined not because you've developed sophisticated taste preferences, but because your digestive system has become less forgiving of experimental cuisine and questionable dietary choices. The days of eating entire rose bushes or sampling unknown plants for the thrill of discovery give way to careful selection based on proven compatibility with your internal processing systems. You still appreciate good food, but the definition of good has evolved to emphasize digestibility, nutritional density, and reliable outcomes rather than novelty and excitement. This shift affects not just what you eat, but how you approach eating, transforming meals from casual consumption to mindful nutrition management. You pay more attention to chewing thoroughly, eating at sustainable pace, and combining foods in ways that optimize digestive efficiency. The process becomes more contemplative and less rushed, reflecting a broader change in how you approach activities that were once automatic, but now benefit from conscious attention. Your relationship with risk undergoes similar evolution, moving from "what's the worst that could happen" to "what's the most likely outcome, and is it worth the potential consequences?" This doesn't represent fearfulness or excessive caution. It reflects realistic assessment based on accumulated experience, with various types of risk and their actual costs versus their theoretical benefits. The gradual shift encompasses changes in social priorities as well as physical capabilities. Maintaining important relationships becomes more valuable than expanding social networks. Preserving energy for meaningful activities takes precedence over participating in every available opportunity. Quality of experience matters more than quantity of activities. These changes happen slowly enough that each day feels normal, but comprehensively enough that looking back over even 6 months reveals significant adjustments in how you approach daily life. The person you're becoming feels like the logical continuation of the person you've always been, but with better judgment, clearer priorities, and more appreciation for simple pleasures that you once took for granted. Reluctant mentorship begins when you realize that younger goats are looking to you for guidance in the art of not dying, a subject you've apparently mastered through the simple expedient of continuing to exist longer than they have. The responsibility feels simultaneously flattering and terrifying. Flattering because it suggests you've achieved something worth emulating, terrifying because it implies you actually know what you're doing, rather than just having successfully muddled through various challenges without experiencing any disasters dramatic enough to eliminate you from the gene pool. Your teaching philosophy develops around the principle that the most important knowledge involves recognizing dangerous situations early enough to avoid them, rather than developing heroic techniques for surviving them after they become unavoidable. This approach disappoints younger goats who prefer dramatic rescue techniques and bold survival strategies to the more practical wisdom of not getting into life-threatening situations in the first place. The curriculum you reluctantly develop covers essential topics like reading human moods, accurately enough to avoid being in the wrong place when humans are having bad days, recognizing the difference between weather that's uncomfortable and weather that's dangerous, and understanding which plants are food versus which plants are decorative obstacles that happen to be green. These subjects lack the excitement of advanced climbing techniques or elaborate escape strategies, but they provide the foundation for long-term survival that flashier skills can't substitute for. Your first protege arrives in the form of a kid who reminds you uncomfortably of your younger, dumber self, enthusiastic, confident, and possessed of just enough intelligence to get into serious trouble without having developed the judgment necessary to avoid it. The kid, whom you privately call Echo because of his tendency to repeat your words with slight variations that reveal he's missed the point entirely, demonstrates the exact combination of curiosity and poor risk assessment that characterized your own early adventures. Echo's approach to learning involves immediate practical application of partial information, leading to situations where he attempts advanced techniques without mastering the prerequisite skills, experiments with dangerous substances after hearing only the first half of your warnings, and interprets your cautious advice as permission to proceed with slightly modified versions of whatever inadvisable project he was already planning. Watching Echo navigate the same mistakes you made provides a perspective on your own development that's simultaneously humbling and enlightening. You remember thinking you understood situations that you clearly didn't comprehend, believing you could handle challenges that were actually beyond your capabilities, and dismissing guidance from older goats who are trying to prevent you from learning lessons the hard way. The responsibility of being the goat who remembers how things used to be extends beyond simple historical knowledge to encompass understanding why certain traditions developed and what purposes they serve. Younger goats often question established practices without understanding the reasoning behind them, assuming that if something seems unnecessary from their current perspective, it must be outdated or irrelevant. Your role becomes explaining not just what the rules are, but why they exist, helping younger goats understand the experiences and observations that led to current practices. This requires you to think more deeply about your own assumptions and traditions, examining whether they still serve useful purposes or whether they've become habitual behaviors that persist without justification. The process of explanation helps you recognize which aspects of your accumulated knowledge represent genuine wisdom versus which parts are simply personal preferences or outdated responses to conditions that no longer exist. Teaching forces you to distinguish between universal principles and situation-specific solutions, between lessons that apply broadly and experiences that were unique to particular circumstances. Learning that wisdom is often just accumulated mistakes with better marketing proves both liberating and slightly deflating. The insights you've developed through years of experience and observation aren't mysterious revelations or inspired breakthroughs. They're mostly the predictable results of pattern recognition applied to situations you've encountered multiple times with varying degrees of success. This realization makes you more humble about the limitations of your knowledge, while also more confident about its practical value. You don't have access to universal truths or profound insights about the meaning of existence, but you do have reliable information about what works and what doesn't work in the specific context of being a goat on this particular farm during these particular circumstances. Your mentoring approach emphasizes practical applicability over theoretical understanding, focusing on skills and knowledge that will help younger goats navigate their daily challenges successfully, rather than trying to impart comprehensive wisdom about life's deeper meanings. The goal is competence rather than enlightenment, survival rather than transcendence. The satisfaction of successful mentoring comes not from creating copies of yourself, but from helping younger goats develop their own approaches to common challenges, using your experience as a foundation for their own growth, rather than a template for exact replication. Your 8th year brings long afternoons spent in contemplation, not because you've suddenly developed an interest in abstract philosophy, but because comfortable napping positions naturally lead to periods of wakeful reflection, when your body is at rest, but your mind remains active. These sessions of involuntary meditation provide opportunities to consider questions that seemed unimportant during busier periods, when immediate survival and social navigation consumed most of your mental energy. The meaning of it all becomes a recurring theme during these contemplative moments. Though your philosophical investigations tend toward practical rather than metaphysical conclusions, sitting in your favorite spot with the sun warming your back, and nothing urgent requiring your attention, you find yourself wondering whether there's some larger purpose to the daily routine of eating, resting, socializing, and surviving, or whether the routine itself constitutes the purpose and searching for something beyond it misses the point entirely. Your philosophical method involves less abstract reasoning than accumulated observation, building understanding through pattern recognition rather than logical deduction. Years of watching seasonal cycles, observing social dynamics, and experiencing various challenges and satisfactions provide a database of information that supports certain conclusions about what matters and what doesn't, what brings satisfaction, and what creates unnecessary suffering. The realization that most of life is simply showing up and eating grass comes not as disappointment but as comfort. What once seemed essential territorial disputes, social climbing, romantic complications, adventures now feels like decoration around the true core of existence. Being present and meeting simple needs with satisfaction. Showing up means paying attention to what each day brings without demanding constant improvement. Eating grass represents both nourishment and the quiet joy of ordinary experiences. Larger pursuits, status, conquest, or escape added flavor, but never defined your worth. Memories of youthful exploits now amuse rather than dominate. What once felt urgent has settled into perspective. This shift doesn't dismiss the past. Those struggles shaped you, but their importance has been recalibrated beside the ongoing satisfactions of competence, relationships, and daily rhythm. Recognition came not from dramatic gestures, but from reliability and good judgment. The security of routine, knowing where you'll sleep, what you'll eat, and who you'll see, emerges as the great reward of maturity. Predictability makes subtle pleasures stand out. Fresh grass tastes sweeter, steady companionship feels richer, small variations glow against a stable background. With time, your philosophy settles into practical optimism. Life doesn't need cosmic meaning to be worthwhile. Success doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. Peace comes not from an absence of problems, but from the competence to handle them. Gratitude for ordinary pleasures and acceptance of limits provide a sustainable foundation for contentment. Watching the next generation stumble through familiar mistakes offers gentle amusement. Their earnest confidence recalls your own youthful disasters, and the comedy lies not in their failure, but in the eternal repetition of goat nature. Your role shifts from participant to observer, like moving from the stage to the audience, where recognition of familiar patterns makes the play more enjoyable. Your middle years bring the satisfaction of being a stabilizing presence. Younger goats look to you for advice. Older ones treat you as a peer. The farmer trusts your steadiness. This role fits comfortably now. You know where you can make meaningful contributions, and where letting go prevents frustration. Boring, you discover, is another word for contentment. Predictable days, free from upheaval, contain the deepest peace. The legacy you leave is practical rather than heroic. Knowledge of safe plants, strategies for feeding without conflict, the knack of reading the farmer's moods. Lessons passed not through speeches but through example, conversation, and repetition. Your influence persists in echo and others who teach in turn, embedding your experience in the herd's collective wisdom. Looking back, you see that what mattered was simple: friendship, good food, comfortable resting spots, and the steady thread of community. What mattered less were the dramas, status games, conflicts, fleeting passions that once consumed so much energy. The extraordinary lies within the ordinary, in the daily miracle of being alive and aware. In the end, even the smallest adventures seeking clover in the sun, noticing the shift of light and wind, become rich with meaning. Your story, though boring to outsiders, embodies a life well lived, sustainable, connected, and full of quiet satisfactions that need no grandeur to matter.